Okay, people, you already know it's Pulla's Hood Famous TV. You know what I'm saying? I know y'all see me with the Bali. I'm chilling with my man, Abrigal Forrester. You know what I'm saying? Which I know him as Stan. You know, he's going to share us a little bit about his story, man. I mean, it's a real touching story. But like I said, my man, he came up out of the game, which is good. And he's doing positive things in the hood. Stan has basically been locked up for 10 years. And at the same time, he was married and he had a young daughter. But he ended up being released after 10 years, got himself a job, and changed his life around. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as you know, we all grew up in the Common Square area, man, just trying to, do the best we can to make it. Pretty much, man, pretty much at a young age, man, I was pretty astute in school, but you know how it is, man. Growing up in an environment where there's a lot of criminal elements, man, and just different personalities, you know what I'm saying? And my mom was the type of mother that dressed me pretty well, so that made me, sometimes mothers think dressing their kid well means that they're putting them out there as, as looking the way that they want them to look, but they don't realize sometimes you're going out there and it's almost making you a target for people who's less fortunate. So for me, transitioning from elementary to middle school, man, was a difficult transition, because I started going to this school where they had kids from all different areas, you know what I mean? And one of the most difficult schools, one of the most difficult public schools, middle schools in the area. And at that time, man, I mean, just getting from school to home was a difficult assignment. But so that forced me to kind of like have to make a decision whether it's going to be about school and being smart or grouping up and trying to survive. And so for most of us, man, it turns into survival. And so, after getting into the streets and getting involved with that, one of my things was, the love of money, because the love of money leads to you liking clothes and, the finer things in life, so to speak. And so that led me into the game of dealing drugs, at a very young age, around 12, 13, pretty much getting into first dealing marijuana, which transitioned about 2 or 3 years later, around 14, 15, into, dealing cocaine. And so that became, what I put all my energy in. I was pretty astute, man, good at math, numbers, measurements, you know what I mean? And that's what comes with that. So sad to say, like, most of my skills and my intelligence was transitioned into basically dealing drugs. So I dealt drugs for a number of years until it finally caught up with me. Came a point where I felt in my personal life, my daughter was being born. I finally settled down with a young lady that I thought we could build a future. And we moved out of town, and pretty much I moved off the set. Kind of, took some money that I had and wanted to open up my own business. So I opened up a dry cleaners in Jamaica Plain, on South Street. But the monkey was still on my back because I never was used to. I got to a point where I was used to having a certain amount of money. And so my money started getting low, and even though I was trying to turn my back on the game, man, the game was all I really knew at that point. And so I turned back to that. Long story short, man, I ended up getting set up by someone who used to buy drugs in the neighborhood, man, and gentleman who actually was the first person to put cocaine in my hand. I ended up getting a 10-year mandatory sentence because I wouldn't become a government informant. So I basically got 18 years, but I got two sentences. 2 of my sentences ran concurrent, and I ended up doing 10 mandatory.
Wow. Y'all hear that? It's not a joke. But okay, now tell me, how did you cope with the fact that you were married at the same time and you had a child and you were in jail? How did you cope with that?
Well, interesting enough, man, I wasn't married when I went in, but we was building this relationship. I actually got married my 3rd year into my bid, but me and my daughter's mother was so close, and we was trying to build a nucleus in the family, man. Something that as a young man, I always made a commitment that I would change my life and not be in the sense of when I have a child, I'm not going to do to my child what I felt like in some cases I didn't have, which was that family nucleus. And so my daughter's mother, she stuck by me, man. We tried to build a relationship, under those circumstances. Neither her or I understood the dynamics, and she was committed. But I even had conversations with her several times about, just moving on with your life. We were both like 21. I was doing 10 years. That was hard, man. Having a beautiful young lady that I love and a daughter. And I wanted her. I didn't want to be selfish, and I wanted her to live her life. But at the same time, she was like, nah, I'm here for you. So my 3rd year in, we decided that we would get married. We got married. And then 3 years after that, we got divorced. I got married and divorced while I was locked up, which was very interesting. And I remember some guys that was around me that used to hear how I used to talk about my daughter's mother when I was going through the situation where she finally, we talked about her moving on, and they said to themselves, like, they thought I wouldn't be able to handle, losing her. But my thing was, man, I've never been a selfish person in that way, you know what I'm saying? I've always been the type of person that, even when I did what I did in the game, it wasn't just about me. It was about, really, committing myself to something that I thought would bring some liberation, man, and some movement as far as coming out of poverty for my people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't just about hurting people, as the DA would have said while I was on trial. It wasn't just about hurting people. It was that, all we seen in that time in the 80s of being progressive was dudes who was in the game. You know, they was making something of themselves. I watched my mother work hard and do things, but still couldn't make ends meet. The only people that was making ends meet was people who was in the game. You know what I mean? So my daughter's mother moved on, and I dealt with my bumps and bruises as far as my emotions, because one of the things I realized, because I was into spirituality a lot. Right. One of the things I realized in her walking away was it brought me to a level where I became in touch with how it feels to lose someone. You know what I'm saying, that you really love, because, growing up, we had a lot of females. Right. We was like breaking hearts and crushing hearts and not understanding what that really meant. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, that was the first time I really was in touch with what losing love was.
Gave you time to really think about it.
Yeah, what losing love was really all about,
Okay. So what was your goals like once you was released? Like, what was your goals? Like,
my main goal was, man, to not go back to the life. To be honest with you, man, I kept it real simple. That was my first objective, was not to go back to the life. So I spent most of my time, man, really trying to grow and develop as a man. Going in there at 21 and knowing that I was leaving 10 years later, I had to ask myself, how should a man function at 31? You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, they stop emotionally developing and growing, man, from the time they enter the door of incarceration. Because it's so psychologically distressing that it'll force you to kind of like block things out. Okay. And when you block things out, then you stop growing, and you don't realize that you haven't grown until you're released. Right. And you're acting like you're 20 when you're 30, 35 or 40. Okay. And I didn't really want that to happen to me. So I spent a lot of time, focusing on my own growth and development, reading, studying, growing spiritually. Because one of the things I felt was my biggest challenge was that I had a warped value system. Right. I feel like regardless of what I was taught at home, man, when I hit them streets, I developed this street corner value system. Right. And where I ended up was actually the residuals of committing myself to that value system.
Falling into that track.
So now my thing was, if I could, begin to develop a certain character in me that would commit to the other side, the other behaviors that I knew, then I knew that the result for me would probably end up in a better place.
Right. So how hard was it for you to find work? Yeah. How hard was it when you got out? How hard was it for you to find work?
For me, it wasn't even that difficult, to be honest with you, man, because I used a lot of my time, man, to rebuild and repair relationships that I damaged, because of my behavior when I was on the outside. Right. So, one of the things I knew, that networking was key. So my first job coming home, I got a job at MIT making $16.15 an hour. But that was through networking, because, I had a family member, which was my my nephew's father, who worked at MIT. Oh, okay. And one of the things I asked him, I said, listen, what would I have to do to get a job there? Right. And he said, listen, they have, he ran the maintenance department. He said, what we do is we clean floors, rugs, I can get you in here as a maintenance technician, which is a quote unquote, different name for a janitor. Right. Pretty much.
That's the new name.
So what I did was I pretty much got me a job that was only paying like $1 a day behind the wall. Okay. But the important thing was for me was to acquire the skills. Right. I never really maintained a job, so I learned how to buff floors, clean rugs. I became like a top maintenance. And I never forget, man, one time this brother that knew me from the streets, he was like, yo, you got this maintenance job, man, and it's like, that's not you, man. You know what I mean? You used to getting money and doing your thing. And I said, listen, man, you don't understand the long-term objective.
Right. You grew.
You see what I'm saying? So my thing was to get skills. And for me, that was the one skill that I knew that if I could master that and build a better rapport with that family member, the chances are I could get in when I get out.
And then it's all about a part of maturing too.
No doubt. And so when I got out, man, sure enough, man, I interviewed at MIT, and I got a job, man. They hired me, man, working as a maintenance technician at MIT, making $16.15 an hour from 11 to 7.
Some people ain't even making that right now.
That's what I'm saying. So I went to work from 11 to 7 a.m. Went home for 2 hours, then went to school from 9 to 2.
Okay, now tell me a little bit about that. I mean, like, how difficult was it? I mean, did the Corey system get in the way at all? Like, I mean, for those that don't know, that might be headed down that road. Like, what did the Corey system, how did that affect you?
Well, to be honest, like, for me, it didn't really affect me because, I had done, one thing about that Corey and all this stuff about backgrounds, it's really about relationships. There's a reason why today out here, and I do this work all the time, when you go in a room with men and women struggling with Corey, you find it to be, minorities.
Right.
And the reason for that is that because most individuals from other communities, they go back to a community of people who embrace them,
right,
who know them. So they don't have a problem overlooking that core.
Right.
So when you really talk about how to overlook the core, it's about really building relationships where people can believe in you.
Network.
So I got somebody to believe in me,
right,
and that will give me a shot where the core didn't become an issue. And interestingly enough, I did my work so well behind the wall that the superintendent of the last institution that I left, he said, "Listen, I'll write your recommendation letter, for any job out there." And I didn't even have to call him on that. He called me on that.
That's good. That's good.
And so putting all that together, got me the opportunity at MIT.
That's some good stuff. Okay, now another thing I wanted to ask you too. How did you become a part of the Street Worker Safe Project?
Yeah, Street Safe Boston. Yeah. Well, basically, man, my pipeline of doing this work. I've been in nonprofits now I've been homegrown on 10 years. Good. And I've been in working in nonprofits for 9 years because I got the MIT job 9 months after my release. I worked there for 9 months after my release. So it's just coming through this pipeline. I've been a nonprofit. I worked for this organization called Strive for 5.5 years. Okay. They developed the ex-offender training program. I helped them develop that, design curriculum, work with them under Sheriff Cabral at the House of Correction. Did some work there for 2.5 years. Then I moved on to the Urban League. Okay. And I managed the Employment Resource Center, all the employment training programs at the Urban League. I pretty much managed that. And then Robert Lewis Jr., who worked for the city at one point, who actually helped develop the first street worker program for the city of Boston that actually was replicated throughout the nation. Moved over to the Boston Foundation, and he became the president of programs there. And I was familiar with him because the Boston Foundation gives a lot of money to nonprofits. So I met him along the way, and I really wanted to come over to the initiative because for 2 reasons. One is to support the cause, but 2 is because what we target is individuals who are basically really disenfranchised and not engaged in any sort of services or outreach to, which is that gang population. Who this community really considers to be, or authorities considers to be high impact players. And so, knowing that I was at one point probably one who they profiled in that way, it was really dear to me to be able to be in a position where I could actually reach out and work with that population. And so that's why I came over to Street Safe Boston.
Now, see, y'all hear that? Not only did he turn his life around, he even came back and helped other kids or teenagers, I should say, that's headed down that wrong path, which is a good thing, and I like that, I respect that. But tell us a little bit about the bachelor thing. I mean, you went and got your bachelor's degree. That's big.
Oh yeah, because education is key, especially with the city that we live in. Everything is about either skills training or education. We live in the education mecca in some cases in the world.
And you did that when you got out.
I did that.
So it's no excuses. He got his bachelor's degree when he got out.
Yeah. Well, first I got my associate's degree. As I was mentioning to you earlier, when I got the job I registered for school right as soon as I came home. Cool. And I went to Roxbury Community College, and I was getting I got my associate's degree there. Okay. And so I worked from 11 to 7 a.m. Went home for 2 hours, got a cup of tea or whatever. Went to school from 9 to 2 and did it all over again. Wow. For 9 months I did that, and then I got a job working at Strive, which was 9 to 5. And then I went to school after school. Took no summers off. Basically got my associate's degree in like 18 months or less. And then I matriculated over to UMass Boston and got my bachelor's in psychology. So I kept this whole process of working in school while trying to raise a family, got married, had a son. All these things are going on at the same time. And one thing I knew that was important I had to give to myself was that education. Cool. Because there's no way that I was going to be able to build my earning capacity as well as be able to move forward in the professional aspect without educating myself. Automatic.